Valved exhaust, Valvetronic exhaust, valve mufflers, whatever you want to call them. They're readily available on Aliexpress. So I bought one for the Project Octavia for the princely sum of €120, and in this video I'm going to review it and see if it's any good. The majority of these universal valve mufflers that you see on eBay and Aliexpress, they look like this, and they come in either left hand side or right hand side, and they come with a variety of diameters for the inlet and for the outlet. One on this specific car is 76mm on the inlet, 76mm on the outlet, but you can get them with 70, 63, I think even 58. One thing they don't come with is an exhaust tip. So on this one I've put an oval carbon tip, sort of blend it into the rest of the car, but there's a plethora available. With regards to the build quality and how they work, so the build quality on the one I've got at least I think is fantastic. The welds are excellent quality. The steel on it is not too thin, it's not too thick. It's a polished finish, doesn't look like it's going to rust. With regards to how they work, with regards to how the valve on the exhaust works, vacuum operated, and I think this is either open or closed, and you have a fob. So with regards to how the gas flow works inside the muffler, you've got the pipe goes into the muffler, and then it will either have one hole which opens into the muffler, or it'll have multiple holes going around the main pipe going into the muffler. Either way, that gets the exhaust gas into the muffler itself, and then there's a pipe inside the muffler which routes the exhaust gas back. So those are the specs. How does the muffler perform? I bought the muffler for this car because the original one on it was like a Jap style exhaust muffler. It was like a 100mm body with like a 90mm tip, and basically it droned like hell. It was like a nightmare at motorway speeds, sort of 3,000, 4,000 RPM. I needed something to reduce that, but at the same time I didn't want an exhaust that was also going to be restrictive. Get a valve muffler, and then maybe I can have the best of both worlds. So that's the reason I chose this specific muffler. Did it achieve what I wanted it to achieve? And I think the answer is 100% yes. When I'm driving along, I can have it fully open, no restriction. And the exhaust drone, when just driving normally, from inside the car, it's completely normal inside the car. It's not silent, you can still hear the exhaust for sure. It's not like a stock exhaust. So for €120, we've got an exhaust that's quiet when we want it to be, and we've got an exhaust that's not a restriction, or a muffler that's not a restriction when we want it to be. So that sounds like a no-brainer for €120, but is it? And I'd say the answer to that is yes and no. There are a few caveats, a few important things to take into consideration when you're looking at getting a valve muffler for your car. I mentioned just now, it's not as quiet as a stock system. So if you're looking for an exhaust as quiet as stock, then I would say these valved exhaust mufflers, these Valvetronic type exhausts, are not the way to go. They are definitely louder than stock, even with the valve closed. And the other big problem with them is that they are restrictive, and that is a big problem. Let me explain why. I can see the vacuum that the engine is pulling. It reduces when the exhaust valve is closed. Now that tells me that is a bigger restriction in the exhaust, and that's what's reducing the engine vacuum. So if it's a restriction at idle, then, you know, just driving around normally, it's going to be a restriction also. So what does that mean? I think on most cars, for most of the time, you're going to need to have the valve open. Now, I think that kind of defeats the point of it. So on this specific muffler, I've come up with my own solution. I wanted something that would gradually open as the engine load increased, so the exhaust is only as loud as it needs to be, not to be a restriction. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I did, even if you don't choose that vacuum box, it still comes with a mechanism and a valve on the exhaust. I got a servo that you use for RC cars, for like the steering, for example. I bought one of those, like a reasonably good quality one, and I've made a frame for that and bolted that to the rear of the exhaust where the valve mechanism is, and I'm using the servo to open and close the exhaust valve according to MAF sensor signal. So as the flow of air going into the engine increases, the valve on the exhaust gradually opens more and more. And with that, I think I've got it as quiet as it can be all of the time. So it's never louder than what it needs to be. It's not an ideal solution because I haven't got an exhaust back pressure sensor on the exhaust. I mean, that would be the next step, is to have the valve opening according to exhaust back pressure. So that's all my experience with it. Let me put it all back into a nice box that you could take away with you. What conclusions have I come to? Who do I think these Valvetronic mufflers are for? And I would say, if you don't have a way to open the exhaust valve manually when you're driving, and if you can't open it a variable amount, so you don't have to live with it like full loud, full quiet, then honestly, I would say these Valvetronic mufflers are for nobody. For the reasons I've said earlier. The one proviso with what I've just said there is that if you can find a Valvetronic muffler or Valvetronic exhaust, whatever you want to call it, that is not restrictive or not as restrictive as this one, then I think this is definitely back on then. If on the other hand you've got a performance exhaust already and you want to make it quieter, I would say the easiest way to go is just to fit a bigger muffler, a bigger exhaust box to the exhaust that you've already got. If you have an exhaust in the car at the moment that you're satisfied with and you want to be able to make it louder or less restrictive when you want at the touch of a button, then I would say just get the valve on its own without the rest of the muffler. You can get the butterfly valve only. So that's my take on valved exhausts, Valvetronic exhausts, valve mufflers, whatever you want to call them, the ones that you can get on Aliexpress. Until the next video, look after yourself and I'll see you again next time.